Welcome to Plaid for Women TV, your go-to resource for the business of life. Whether the CEO of your home or your own business, women struggle with the same challenges. At Plaid TV, we discuss real-life issues affecting real women and offer solutions to help you achieve your goals, get connected, and be heard. Together, we will change the world. Let's do this. No mean girls allowed.
Welcome everybody to Plaid TV. I'm Siobhan Palmer. In this video, we're going to be talking about domestic violence. Very tough topic, but one we really need to talk about more as women and men. My guest is Michelle Morgan. She is the director of One Safe Place, the nation's leading family justice center. Michelle, welcome.
Thank you.
In this video, we'd really like to talk about the actual cycle of violence. Why don't you take us through the whole process where it eventually leads to domestic violence?
Absolutely. In domestic violence relationships, there are 3 phases in the cycle of violence.
Okay.
First phase, generally what's happening in that phase is there's poor communication between both parties. Feels like you're walking on eggshells. There's arguments that are happening, and everything is around power and control during that first phase. The second phase is when we call that when an actual abusive incident occurs or the threat of an abusive incident occurs. And for that, I mean, they would threaten to kill you or threaten to harm themselves, those sorts of examples, or an actual physical incident occurs. The reason that some of the physical incidents occurs is during that first phase, they're trying to assert power and control over someone and they're losing that. And so then they basically lash out.
Take it to the next level physically.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And so that happens. Then what happens is there's some emotional things that are happening where there's some manipulation that's happening. The batterer will typically blame our victim for what has occurred. And then our final phase is what we move into is my personal favorite. We call it the honeymoon phase. The honeymoon phase, for some relationships, has different characteristics, but usually they're similar in capacity. Okay. That includes anything from, baby, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean for this to happen. There are things that are happening. It can be gifts. It can be showers. I promise change. I'll go to counseling, or why don't we go to marriage counseling? Many things that are happening, but it's the apologetic phase. So typically what happens is for women that are in those abusive relationships is after the apology happens, there may be some recant, some denial of abuse that's occurring, and then ultimately there may be some reconciliation that occurs, and then they get back into the relationship together.
You know, you brought up something very interesting about a person tends to be very narcissistic where they're the abuser, yet they place the blame on the victim. That's very, very interesting dynamic there.
Very common characteristic.
It is very common.
Very common characteristic.
Of an abuser.
Absolutely.
Okay. Many people ask this question, why do you think people stay in an abusive relationship?
I will tell you this, as a professional, we don't like that question.
Okay.
One of the reasons we don't like that question is because it implies and places blame on the victim. It implies that it's their fault that the abuse is occurring, thus the reason they haven't left. One of the questions that we like to ask is, well, why does the abuser continue to abuse? But when you look at that question in and of itself, when it looks at blaming the victim, part of the issue becomes it's so complex.
Yes.
In these relationships of why women leave or why they stay in the relationship. And I'll tell you one of the things as well. We've done a really good job in the women's rights movement in putting awareness of domestic violence in the forefront in our community. And what that's done is created quite the community exposure and awareness about it. But some of the things that we haven't done with that messaging, in the messaging, some of the things that have happened is when it becomes a domestic violence situation, the first thing that people say is, well, you need to leave. You need to get out. But we also know that statistics tell us the most dangerous time in a domestic violence situation is when a victim is leaving.
Okay, so why is that?
Because what's happened is the abuser is losing that ultimate power and control. And so then it becomes the most dangerous time in that relationship for the victim.
Because in their mind, they're losing what they ultimately had control over, and that person is trying to pull away from the relationship.
Correct.
Very interesting. You go back to when you interview victims at One Safe Place and do some counseling, do you find that a lot of the reasons that people finally got out of situations were that they had the wherewithal financially or family support, or what was it ultimately that got them out of the situation?
You know, we've got a Voices Committee, which is a group of survivors that meets with us on a regular basis.
It's called Voices Group?
Voices. It's our Voices Committee. So they're all survivors. They've all been through their journey, and now they're here to give back. And we actually had this conversation. We asked them last week, tell us what was the most impactful for you. And when you listen to this group of 10 survivors, they all will tell you different things. And what they will tell you is they have to be ready until they individually are ready, which varies different times. We ask them, tell us what impacted you. It's different things. For some, it was the children. When the abuser then turned and went to go after the children, that impacted them to make a change.
The light bulb went off, right?
Absolutely. For some of them, they had gone to get resources and learn about their individual situation. Then that honeymoon phase kicked in, they went back, but they picked up on key things that happened. And when those key things occurred again, then they were much quicker to come back and then leave the relationship. So what we hear is it varies, and which is what's so complicated and so hard and complicated about this issue is there's not an easy one answer because it's different for each person in their individual journey of when they're ready.
You know, we're here in the state of Texas, but this is an area I'm very interested in. What protections are in place from a legal standpoint to protect a woman or man who's gotten away from a domestic violence situation? You hear horrific stories about people being hunted down in their work by an ex-spouse or partner that shoot them dead at their place of work, going to daycare centers. It's just, how are we as a country able to better protect these victims once they break away from their abusers?
So in the state of Texas, we have what we call permanent protection orders. So kind of the process that works, if law enforcement is called and they make an arrest in the state of Texas, a county magistrate will put in what we call an emergency protective order. It's usually good anywhere from 30 days to 90 days if an arrest is made. Not all the time is there. Or the second option is in what we call the permanent protective order. Permanent protective orders can be filed for at our district attorney's office for free. We actually help clients do that initial questionnaire assessment. And then those permanent protective orders are minimum 2 years, but we also now in the state of Texas have lifetime protective orders. But what you're looking at there is really having to look at the history, the incidents, have the police been involved? Police don't necessarily have to be involved, but we've got to go to a family court judge to be able to prove that there's some sort of evidence of what type of domestic violence has been occurring in this relationship.
Yeah. And again, sadly, that's the legal recourse you can take, but in terms of the actual person and the relationship going on, it's still a very dangerous situation once somebody leaves a domestic violence.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Let's talk about positive. Talk about some of your clients that have gone through One Safe Place, gone through this very integrated program, and came out on the other side to a very, healthy, happy, productive life.
I've got one client that I actually, in my journey of starting as an advocate at the police department, is where I first connected with her. And she had been multiple years of physical abusive relationship. The one abuse that she described the majority of the time, that his method of what he used was he would pull her, she had long, gorgeous blonde hair, and she would pull her ponytail and drag her down their stairs. They lived in like a townhome, and he would drag her down the stairs multiple times while she was pregnant. She was pregnant, and he had broken her leg and had done, multiple things. She had never had called the police on him, and met with her and got protective order put in place, got a divorce attorney, started that process, got her a counselor, had done many things to get the process moving with her. And probably about 2 months into it, she stopped returning phone calls. And then about a year later, about the same time frame, she calls me. Something else has happened again. Still no report. So once again, we pick up everything again. We begin the process again. She relocated to a very isolated area, and there wasn't a lot of support for her. She had gone to a very small church, and the church began to tell her that she needed to forgive him because he was her husband.
Forgive him.
Needed to forgive him. So then she reconciled again, went back again, and part of my issue is she was too far away from me. She moved about 45 minutes away, and she was in an isolated area where she was limited to the number of resources that she could get. And then year 3 came. And this time I didn't get a call from her. I got a call from a friend of hers that told me she was in the hospital. So I went through my contacts for her, reached out to her mother, and then she called me back a day later, and she said, I promised Michelle I was going to call you. You were on my list of people. That time, he once again assaulted her and threatened her, and she was holding her 2-year-old child. So that was the only time in their 10-year marriage that she had actually called the police. That time, while she was holding her child, she was done. So then we relocated. She stayed closer to the area. We got her connected with more services. And it's been 2 years since that last year. So I dealt with her for over 3.5 years and was patient until she was ready. Now she's divorced. She has a visitation schedule in place. She still has a co-parenting relationship with him, with her and her. They've got 3 children together.
Wow.
So she still has to have some involvement with him. She struggles. The boys are having a difficult time, but now she's giving back, and she sits on our Voices Committee, and she's on her journey. It's not easy, but she is grateful every day that she's now out of that abusive situation.
What an amazing story. Amazing. Michelle, thank you so much. Please give our audience information on how they can get more information on One Safe Place and all these amazing services that you provide.
Absolutely. If someone's in imminent danger, an immediate danger, please call 911. If you'd like to get more information about One Safe Place, our telephone number is 817-916-4323, or you can go to our website at onesafeplace.org.
Michelle Morgan, thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Siobhan Palmer with Plaid TV. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for watching Plaid TV. See you next time.